This will be a short video with tips to help intermediate volleyball players play better. Modern volleyball players have greater access to videos and game footage, which should be able to help them learn better than in the past. A good way to learn volleyball now and in the future is to watch men's international volleyball and learn their concepts. This slide shows how volleyball offenses have changed over the years. In the 70s and 80s, you had an X play was very common, where the middle hitter would go up and the opposing middle blocker would jump with them, and then you'd set a quicker, a little slower set, like a 2-ball, over the shoulder of the middle hitter and hope to hit it over the declining middle blocker on the opposite side. Also, you'd try to do switches and stuff like that and get yourself out of sorts and rhythm. In the late 80s and early 90s, you start to see the back row player coming out of the right back, and you also saw the outside hitter on the left side try to do a variation to come off either the tandem play or just run pin to pin to try to mix up defenses. In modern volleyball, we went away with the swing hitting, and we kind of went with 4 hitters. We have a back row hitter come out of the pipe or the bick or the middle, and there's variations on top of that too. So basically we've gone to a 4-hitter offense with either 1 or 2 back row hitters to help overload against 3 blockers, looking for open seams. I'm going to recommend watching 3 YouTube videos. These are readily available on YouTube. One of them is called Brazilian Volleyball Mix. That's quite a good video. It's the 2000s Brazilian offense, and you get to see a lot of what they do. You can also watch the opposing team on the other side to see what kind of defenses there are. It's got a good end view, which is something you want to watch. That's one of my tip number 1, is to watch end views, because that gives you better strategy look. There's also a video called Masters of the Pipe. That's exclusively pipe hitting or middle back hitting, but that's a pretty good volleyball watch for the FIVB Men's International. And in the middle of the USC, it's an AVCA tip of the week. It's a good video. It's 20 minutes long, but there's a little video portion in the middle where you can watch, and you can really see how the USC men's team has some wide open looks at the net. So I advise to watch at least the Brazilian video, like all 12 positions on both the offense and the defense. Watch it a few times for each position so you understand where they sit, what they do. You probably also want to watch some of the serving. That's a good tip. So tip number 1 is watch those videos over and over till you're very familiar with it, and that'll give you a good start on concepts. Now we're going to talk about passing. What I've drawn on the left-hand side here is a series of concentric circles coming away from the expected setting position, which is sort of 10 feet in from the right sideline, foot or 2 off. And I've drawn in the 3 hitters. You got a middle hitter, left and right side. And there's a scoring system in volleyball for passing, particularly on serve receive. And so if you pass a good pass exactly to where the setter's going, and good, tempo, not a shoot, not a line drive pass at them or anything, they're able to set all 3 hitters. And so we give them a score of 3. As you vary away from that, you can only really set the outside 2 hitters, and eventually if the pass is really, really far off, you really only have a left side hitter. So that's how you get a 3, 2, and 1 scoring system. If you're really out of system, like somebody else other than the setter has to take the ball, or it's just a mixed up offense, or you overpass, or you get aced, that's basically a 0. So you can average those up, or you can just take a look at what you're trying to do, but you're trying to hit 2s and 3s most of the time. So tip number 2 is try to get there, or try to get a high amount of 2 and 3 type passes at good pace to the setter, so they can make a full offense. Or the other way you can look at it is really try to reduce your 0 passes. Even a 1 is better because it's on your side. You'll get a swing, whereas an overpass or an ace pretty much most of the time leads to a direct point, something you want to avoid. So think about passing. That's the point of this slide. Still on passing, we have the same diagram on the left. And tip number 4 is that when you have somebody serving you with a very high velocity, what it's sometimes easier to do, especially if they got an ace or an overpass or two, is you just want to pass higher inside your court. Most offenses can seem to adapt to that, and it's just a way to get yourself out. And you see really good teams do that when they get aced a couple times. They'll just pass a little higher until they can get a side out and get on their way. Tip number 5 is you can watch some of the game time videos, and you'll be surprised sometimes as an intermediate player how high they pass if you put it relative to the net or something like that. What you see in intermediate volleyball is they try to run either a fast offense or they don't pass really high, and the ball gets on the setter pretty quickly. So those are my 2 tips for additional passing. I'm not going to give you a lot of tips for hitting. There's a lot of videos out. I've drawn a very basic right-left type of 4-step approach. So tip number 6 is in transition, especially get off the net so you can get your full 4-step approach. You see a lot of people don't do that. They don't jump high because of that, and it goes downhill from there. Tip number 7, the faster you approach, the higher you jump. I think that's pretty obvious. Tip number 8, a little bit controversial. You see a lot of videos out there that tell you to twist your left foot at the end, so you're opening it up, especially for left-sided hitters. You see a lot of videos out there. But you also see videos like volleyball one-on-one from the back row. You don't want to turn that foot. You don't want to break. And probably injuries along there too. Tip number 9 is just learn to land softly and stay in control. It's mostly the stay in control portion of it. Again, not great hitting tips, but a lot of other videos out there. I'm just going to leave those hitting as is. Team defense is sometimes a question I field a lot about from intermediate players. They don't know where to go. What I've shown here is a typical left side attacker with the red lines are power angle and power line. Those are the 2 big hits that are usually there. I throw in a couple blockers, and you get the 4 players in a perimeter defense. So tip number 10 is make sure you have somebody on the power angle. I usually prefer that's a back row player. Because that's a little bit easier. When offenses get quicker and stuff like that, you won't be able to get that person off the net to dig well. Don't play middle up. That's just a bad idea in general. You're going to get walloped with a couple balls against good hitters, and you're leaving the back row open. And tip number 12 is where they talked about the off blocker. They won't be able to get back all the time, so you'll be inside the 10-foot line for a really, really tight slice type hard hit. Or more likely, you're just going to pick up tips and stuff like that to the middle of the court, and that takes care of that. If you send a lot of people will play rotation defense. That's where you're going to put that off outside hitter, come back and play defense, and everybody twists around. But the idea there is your right side setter person would come in and not play defense at all. But that doesn't really work too much in the men's international game. So what you see mostly is the perimeter defense. So learn that. Same graphic of perimeter defense is on this screen. Tip number 13 is the middle back runs the back row, looking for off tips and off speed shots to the corners and protects against that. They will, if there's a seam in the block, you want to step into the seam of the block in case you got a quick hitter or something from the outside. Otherwise, I would say normally if you've got a good double block, you want to line up slightly outside the middle hitter. So in this case, you'd want to be slightly to the right out there of center, just to dig that power shot there. And tip 14 is that if you're in the right back and you're a right back setter in a 6-2 type rotation, old school would be if you had to pass that ball, you'd pass it up to the right front person and they do the setting. But in modern volleyball, you'll pass it more on the left side, and you'll pass it 10 feet in from the left side at the 10-foot line, so that normally that Libero type player can make that set, and then you can go back to the right side or the left side. Again, you're usually a little bit out of system there. You won't run the middle, but that's how things have changed in modern volleyball. So this is a pair of snapshots from the Brazilian video. In the top half, Brazil's attacking on the left side up there, and the red team on the other side. You'll see how I've drawn in 3 lines. The front row blocker hasn't really got it back to the 10-foot line. He's kind of covering tips and dinks. Right behind him, you've got the Libero in white, and they're on the power angle. And the middle back is shifted slightly to be just inside the middle blocker. The bottom video is Brazil's defense. Again, it's just reversed. The opposite team is hitting on the left side. You can see with the 3 white overhead markers, the left side hitter has come way in, looking for tips and dinks. There's no Libero in this particular rotation on this offense, but the best defensive specialist is in the left back taking the power angle, and the middle back is taken again just off the inside angle, the middle blocker. And in both those slides, the right back hitter is kind of filling a gap. The men's in both of these have their right side blocker way outside. It's kind of in a little bit inside set, so there's a gap between the 2 blockers, and you'll want that right side digger in between that gap. Either that or outside the hitter if that's the case. So a little bit about serving on the left. If you don't know the numbers, usually the serving position is the number 1 position, and then it rotates around counterclockwise, so the 3 front rows are 2, 3, and 4, and 5 and 6. 6 is middle back. So when you're serving the opponent, tip number 15 is to learn to either jump float. I even recommend this to beginners. There's no real need to stand on the ground flat-footed and serve anymore. You pretty much want to do a jump float, either conservatively or you can add a lot of power to it. And if you're really, really good and you're not making a lot of errors, you can go into the jump spin. You'll see those in advanced volleyball. Tip 16 is just serve a seam between passers. Anytime a passer has to move, it's not right to them, they're going to make a worse pass and the offense won't be as good. And tip number 17 is just serve over the height of the net. So a lot of people tie a piece of tape or string between the 2 tops of the antennas. But yeah, the faster, flatter serves make it harder for the opposing to serve receive, so you'll see that a lot. Although it's not recommended to serve short, you usually want to serve deep to the 1, 6, and 5 locations. You can serve short if the opponent doesn't get back for their full approach typically, or they really pass the ball low so it has to come back to them. Those are good offensive strategies. Another times you might want to serve short is when you're going to interrupt somebody's path, like the middle hitter's path. It takes them out of offense. Of course, if the opposing team, tip number 19, has a really, really good hitter and they're on the outside, let's say they're hitting on the left side out of zone 4 over there. Obviously, if you serve the ball to zone 5, it's a little easier for them to run their offense. Whereas if you serve it over to zone 1, some setters at the intermediate level aren't going to be able to make that pass out to the left, and they'll end up setting the weaker hitter. Tip 20 is pretty self-obvious. If you got a choice between between receivers, and you got a really good passer on the other side, you probably want to avoid them and go to other people. A number of times in intermediate volleyball, somebody will serve the strong receiver, and they'll side out, and then they'll come right around the next rotation, and they'll side out again, and they'll do that 3 times in a game. And you just want to identify who's the weaker passer and go after them. If you watch a lot of volleyball, they'll typically quote you a hitting efficiency or hitting percentile. For those that don't know the calculation, it's your kills minus your errors over your total attempts. So each attempt you make, it'll get a little worse if you don't kill it, and errors really, really kill your hit percentage. Of course, you can go negative on that number, but just like baseball or something, a good number is 300. So, if you don't have, somebody taking stats for you, which you're not likely to have, and you don't have any video, that you can go back and kind of calculate your things, you can kind of keep track of kills and neutral attempts and errors, and then write them down after the game and see where you are. But the tip here is that if you're not hitting 300 or better at any particular on your left side, your right side, your back row, then that's something you probably want to spend a little more time and try to get better at on those swings and approaches so that you're able to hit 300. Once you're consistently hitting above 300, you should generally spend more time on defense or serving or some other skills rather than trying to be perfect hitting. Here's some tips on blocking. Once you can jump over the net, you should press your hands over and penetrate into the court and get it wide because you'll take more area. It's represented by the green and the red there. Red it would be if you just went straight up, and green is if you penetrate over, you'll take much more court. On this slide, there's 3 more tips to help you slow down your opponent at the net. In general, against good hitters, blocking has a low percentage of success. So the motto of these 3 tips is pretty much keep trying and stick in there and just learn to slow down your opponents. These 3 tips are about aggressive defense, learning to play the ball with your overhand in like a setting type motion, and about aggressive setting. Dumping on 2 is something you want to incorporate into your offense. Tip 36 is something in particular that really good hitters do, is they learn to hit hard angle, hard line, and then against big blockers they'll hit high flat off the fingers. Something you have to really learn to be an advanced player. Also, tip 38, you see this a lot in intermediate play, is that they'll send the ball over medium depth to the opposing team's best hitter, and it's just not a good idea. Just find the corners or find an open spot in the opponent's weakness defense. If you've hit your last few set of balls right at the opposing defender, not making a move, and they're getting the ball up on you, you're probably going to want to have to mix in some other shots and basically make defenders move. As defenders move, they don't pass as well in their offenses, and it's great. Volleyball is typically thought of a game of errors, and usually whoever makes the most errors will end up losing. So when you see errors being made, or when you're making errors yourself, think about the tips that I've given you here today, and sometimes they'll fall into one of those categories. So if you try a little bit of thought, a little bit of practice, I think that you can get rid of those errors, and in general begin to be an advanced volleyball player. See more tips online at www.ats101.com/volleyball.